Today, it does feel like there's just so much competition.
Can we imagine a society other than this?
Everyday people have to come together.
My name is Xiaofei Xu. I'm 25 years old and I'm from China.
Hi, I'm Chelsea. I'm 29 years old and I'm from the UK.
My name is Russell. I come from the United States. I'm 37 years old. It's an economic and political system. I think you have to mix the two. And it sort of focuses on free market. So less focus on government, less interference from government, and more so the exchange of goods and services. To make more money. It's all about making a profit.
Exactly. I think my definition of capitalism is profit over people, which I think maybe is a cynical way of looking at it. But I do think that fundamentally maybe the value lies more, or the focus lies more in the profit as opposed to people.
I think I would agree with that. And since I'm from China, the official way to put it is that we don't have Western-style democracy. That's safe. But we still do have capitalism. It's just a different, like economic-wise, like when you look at China, like it's hard for you to say that, well, this is Soviet-style communism. It's not Soviet-style communism. It is possible to have capitalism just as your economic system or like some version of it, but not to have the political, because, my point is I think we have to separate them both. I've separated them from each other. I think capitalism for me is just a economic system, a way to organize your economy.
I think that's the real toxic side of capitalism, is that why do you need to be the most powerful? You know, what's the point in being the richest country? You know, what is the benefit of, you know, being the most powerful economy in the world? Like, what does that actually achieve? And I think because of this capitalist system, we're pitting ourselves against each other. It then creates this tension. And I think that trickles down into outside of economy, societal issues. And in the UK, we had Brexit happen in 2016 as well. And I think it's stemming from capitalism, in that people in the UK were thinking that people from Europe were stealing their jobs and things like that. And it's just this, it fuels this real hatred within countries that I think that could be lessened to an extent. And then you wouldn't end up with something that I think is really bad, that the UK end up leaving the European Union because they want to be a single power on their own. And what are they actually trying to achieve, you know? And I think that is a real negative to having this sort of race between being a strong economy.
I would say that it's a fascinating thing that I noticed. I moved to France like last August. It's part of it is a stereotype. Part of it is just not true. Part of it is true. Like they have a very strong labor right protection law. Everybody have 5 weeks of paid leaves guaranteed. It's just great. But then the side effects of that, well, if you may, is that, you know, sometimes they're not working. And then I would just ask them, you know, how do you think with this kind of economy, with this kind of productivity level, how do you expect to compete with the US or China? Why do we have to compete with China or the US? Like, they're so huge. We're just so tiny. Like, we're just here minding our own businesses. Why do we? And for me, that's a very new perspective, because growing up, it was never an option, if you will, to not compete, because the idea is that we only have a set amount of resources, right? If you don't fight for it, someone else is gonna get it. So for us, competition is linked to your quality of life. And I felt like maybe that link isn't that strong or obvious in Europe.
I think, there's a belief, I think maybe in Europe, that you're born with certain rights, and you have the right to an education, you have the right to have a house, you have a right to have healthcare. And, you know, maybe in China and the US, you do have to fight for it. You know, I think that in Europe, we are really protected. And I think that's really great, and we should uphold that. And I think maybe that's where that urge to have to fight for what you want or you need in your life. If I get sick or something, I know I'm going to be sorted out just in case. Or if I have kids, I know they're going to have a good education that's been monitored by people to make sure that they're not failing. I don't know, and I wonder if that's not necessarily the case in the countries that you guys are from.
Of course, for the United States, no, not at all. You will find Americans who will resort to going to another country to get medicine and to receive treatment, because for a lot of people in the United States, it's not a right to have health care. It's a privilege. I must say that being in Europe, I do feel more comfortable as far as healthcare is concerned. I had an accident a couple of years back. I was hit by a vehicle,
oh my God!
But it was fine. But the first thing that came to my mind was when the people told me when I came to, we're taking you to the hospital, and I was in my head. I said, I do not want an ambulance.
Yeah.
Because it's so expensive to be transported. It could cost you upward to more than $1,000 just to go to a hospital. So you will find people in the United States, which is one of the countries that is supposed to be the home of freedom and where you can excel, where people are having to take an Uber. They prefer to take an Uber to go to the hospital.
It's cheaper than the ambulance. Wow.
So it's a lot of things that we don't see.
That's capitalism, isn't it?
Because in China, we are still a communist country, so we couldn't be so explicit to say that, well, if you don't have money, you should die. No, we still have to call it a relics from our communist past, call it that what communist countries are supposed to do. We are somewhat in between the US and Europe.
Right.
We certainly do not have what you guys have here, but we are better than the US, I would say.
We should not have to, especially in the United States, have to make a life or death decision about the hospital because we're worried about a bill. It's as if you're worrying about the money more than your life.
Yeah.
And we see if you do not have the correct insurance, even with insurance in the United States, you still can come out paying thousands of dollars. And it just doesn't feel like it's a fair system. So it just goes to show that the way that our system is set up is not for the everyday American in the United States. Dealing with capitalism, when we have companies who are literally and business leaders who are literally writing laws. There was at one point there was a bill that was being proposed, and the headline on it in the center of the page, it wasn't from a governor. It had the logo of this organization in the center, and they said, what? "Why is this in the center?" Literally on the floor, they talked about this. So it goes to show that a lot of the decisions that we see on TV, where they're debating a law, a lot of the decisions are made already. It's just, we have to do this because it's the right thing to do.
That's the thing that it's hard to get around is corruption. I don't think you have corruption in communism, you have corruption in capitalism, you have corruption in socialism. It's, for example, in the UK with COVID happening and when it first happened in March 2020, the government were like, we really need a PPE, like protection, like masks for the NHS. Yeah. And so they just went to their friends who they went to Oxford with, and they were like, okay, we have £5 million. We'll pay you for the masks. Yeah. The masks to make actually only cost like £100,000. So this person's friend that they went to university with made a profit out of the government being friends with them, essentially. Yeah. But I think that happens in communism as well. It's like there's a certain amount of corruption. And I think that's the issue. Like, how do you avoid that so that people are being treated fairly and it's not one person is being made rich or powerful at the detriment of the everyday people like us, I
feel like that's an interesting point. And then it's a question that we rarely ask ourselves. Mm-hmm. Can we imagine a society other than this?
Yeah.
Can we imagine ourselves living in like a world that's not ran by, say, capitalism? We lost sight of, like what could be our alternatives, or should we have alternatives? Or like you said, it's just, it's just the same across the board. Like call it socialism, call it communism, call it capitalism. It's humanity. It's fucked up. It's never going to change.
We have some very powerful industries in the United States that bring in so much revenue.
Yeah.
For example, when we talk about the prison system in the United States, it's unreal, and this is all on the side of capitalism.
Do you think Americans have class consciousness? In the West, like major Western countries, France, the UK, Germany, you have socialist parties, labor parties, which you just don't find in the US. Like in names, it's just the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And it's all it just included everybody from center to left to extreme left, whatever. Like they're all in this party. And my experience, having lived 7 years in the US, is that people tend to focus more on racial tensions than class differences.
That's very true. And what you find is that there's a lot of rhetoric. We sort of hear this expression, the rich get rich, the poor get poor, we're losing the middle class. We hear it so much that it almost does, it's like, okay, yeah, we hear it. And what's important for the people in power is that they continue to teach people who are lower middle class, in poverty. They still, even though these people are so much closer to each other, economically, socially, they are taught that they're different. And I think that that's a problem in the United States. Even if you have a poor white person, a poor black person, who are basically in the same economic situation, they are still taught that they're different. They're still taught that they're different. So even though this person is white and just as poor as this black person, they're taught that they're still better than the black person. So that's a way to keep these people apart, because what happens if they come together? The more people that to come together to fight against these institutions that are in our government, in our political system, the more people that come together, that's the only thing, in my opinion, that will work. The rich are literally getting richer. Yeah. We had a pandemic, but did they lose money?
No.
There's more billionaires right now because of the crisis. People are not realizing that they are a lot more similar than different. And until somehow someone can bring consciousness to the general population that if you guys continue to do this, you're going to continue to do this by yourself, and you're going to stay where you are, while the rich, horrible it is, continue to get more wealthy.
Yeah, I saw a stat actually yesterday, and it was something like billionaires made like 37 billion in the pandemic, and poor people lost 37 billion. So that money just kind of literally just channeled into the pockets of rich people that were able to profit off of us being at home and on Amazon. Or
it sort of goes to extremism a lot, and it's as if I want this for the betterment of the whole America, but I will go about it two different ways. And we see that when people go for someone who is extremely right in the United States, and someone who is extremely left, like what we saw.
The impact of capitalism on millennials, I think, is a really interesting topic to think about, because I think my parents' generation actually really benefited from capitalism. There's a big boom in like the 80s, and my dad is from a really poor working class background. He was able to get himself on the property ladder, start a business, and climb through, I guess, socially move to a more middle class, comfortable background, which has obviously benefited me. But if it was that I had been born in his environment in 1992 when I was born, I don't think I would have been able to get on the property ladder as easily, which I think is a really big part of capital, and being able to build up your wealth. And I think that is just a symbol for a lot of things in capitalism as millennial. I think the job market as well is not as big. I think people were able to walk into jobs a bit easier, sort of in the 80s, 40 years ago. But today it does feel like there's just so much competition out there, and the stakes are much higher, and the division is much wider, that it's so much harder to get ahead.
I think China is an interesting case because we only opened up our economy in the late 70s. So if you separate millennials into like those who were born before 89, those who were born after 89, those who were born before 89 still got onto, what your dad got onto, because in China it started late.
Yeah.
But then for those born after 89 in the 90s, it's really just this, our parents took all the opportunities, and then they're still alive. They're not gonna retire anytime soon. What do we have? The economic boom didn't create enough space for millennials born in that time range, and then so like we're stuck in schools. We go on to do masters after masters after masters, and then we're masters of nothing, and we still couldn't find a job. It's just, you meet baristas in Starbucks who are like 29, 30. I was like, whose dream is it to work as a barista in Starbucks after school? No one.
Everyday people have to come together. And I think that a lot of people who are part of the millennials, they have an idea of this. They're sort of more aware. And it seems as if they're more cognizant of social issues and things that are going on in the country. And they just see this sort of juxtaposition between what could be and what is not, until we as a country come together and demand change. Then the system will continue as it is, and we will continue to see this gap between the rich and the poor.
I think the way forward as well is, demanding change. Like, we need to go out and vote. We have democracy, we can do that. Also, your pound, your euro, your dollar is also a vote. You don't have to shop with Amazon, or you could shop with a local market, support local businesses, things like that. That also shows where you want to give your power, your money to. And if you keep it local, I think that also, it just shows where we want to support. And I think we need to be more cognizant of where we're spending our money,
I think another thing that we should build awareness around is just who we are. Because I think a lot of people are lost with their class identities. Because right now, with all this fancy thing, you work in an office building, like you wear suits, you feel good about yourself. You forget that you are still a proletariat because you don't control the means of production. Why did the rich people got richer during the pandemic? It's because of their stocks. And you don't get rich in a capitalist society with paychecks, with salaries. You get rich with capital, which is your stock, your stuff that many people do not own.
Exactly.
And if you do not own that, you need to realize that, then you're not benefiting from the system. Are you guys optimistic about the future? Do you guys think we can fix it?
I want to be optimistic. I want to be hopeful. I mean, I think climate change is the biggest issue that we need to face, and I don't think people are doing enough about it. And capitalism feeds into that directly. Yeah, I'm going to stay hopeful. I'm going to stay optimistic, but something doesn't tell me it's going to be
true. Yeah.
I'm going to be optimistic, and I am going to hope that we get back to a system where we can honestly separate the corporations from policy, because they're completely intertwined right now. The idea of giving a corporation can give freely to political campaigns, and it's basically the corporations who are deciding what we do, and that is just I think is as long as we keep it like this, we will not
Yeah.
go in the right direction.
You could only hope for the best.
I mean, we're going to hope for the best.
Yes, we're gonna hope for the best.
Totally.
It's nice talking to you.
Yeah, this was a great chat.
Yes.
Such a good combination of.
That's what I
I
need
feel like
after
I'm right in the middle.
COVID.
I've got the US and I've got China.
Oh yeah, sure.
That's the role that Europe should play.
Yeah.